It's too early sometimes to get up and do the show, you know? It's like you're up late at night watching the game. Oh, we're on? Well, then start the show.
You're tuned in to the hottest sports analysis of the week with your hosts Ron Dolbeck and Chris Roberts. And now, here's the first round.
It's a good morning in the first round. You're live with us on YouTube. Some of us are awake, meaning everyone else on the staff. And some of us stayed up a little too late watching UCLA for some reason because they start their games at 11 o'clock West Coast time, which means it's 2 a.m. here. And there's just not enough Jolt, Monster Energy drink, and coffee to keep me awake. But nevertheless, we press on to bring you the greatest sports stories happening today. But we need to do one thing first. Let's get it started with our wrap-up from yesterday in college football, starting off with the number one team in the country. Clemson goes on the road to North Carolina. I thought this was going to be a blowout, but Mac Brown, 2 thumbs up. They get the loss, but Mac Brown and his Fighting North Carolina Tar Heels, every bit of that game showed up, had heart, and at the end of the game, they have a touchdown, a choice to go for 2 and win the game or kick the extra point and take it into overtime. Even though there was about 1:23 left, he goes for 2. I say thumbs up Mac Brown. Great job. They don't convert. Clemson squeaks out with a 21-20 victory. Mac Brown just had his team ready to go. I was impressed. Clemson stays undefeated on the season. My blowout game, an absolute waste of film yesterday, had to be number 5 going on the Ohio State going on the road to Nebraska. Ohio State is just really superior and strong in all areas. Coaching, recruiting, play calling, and did I say coaching? I think anybody had any questions about Ryan Day replacing one of the best head coaches in the past 30 years, you could throw those out the window. Ohio State was absolutely ready and took Nebraska to the woodshed yesterday in an absolute blowout. Adrian Martinez, 47 yards passing and 3 interceptions. Nebraska's in a world of hurt, and I don't want to be Scott Frost waking up this morning. As tired as I am, I'd rather be me than him. Alabama gets it done at home against Ole Miss, 59-3. The only story there is how many touchdowns does Tua want to go for? He's the only quarterback in Alabama history to go for over 400 yards, 2 games in 2 games total, which to me is hard to believe because we've been playing college football for a long time, and it's just hard for me to believe stats that come out of Alabama sometimes. Like Mark Ingram is the only Heisman winner. I mean, I don't know. Tua's got to be up there for the Heisman in the top 4, top 5. One of the games I was really intrigued with yesterday, number 18, Virginia goes on the road in a bounce-back game that Notre Dame had to have, and they got it. They would get the win at home, 35-20. Here's the absolute college football stat of the day, though. Yesterday, Virginia, 29 rushes, 4 yards. 29 rushing attempts and 4 yards. Bronco Mendenhall didn't have his coffee yesterday morning because that can't happen. Notre Dame's defense saves the day. Their offense was just pedestrian. Number 21, USC goes on the road to number 17, Washington. Washington gets the job done, 28-14. The problem with USC, too many turnovers, and they're not manufacturing offense. Yesterday, Washington's defense shuts them down. Mississippi State, for some reason, wasted a lot of time and money going to play at Auburn yesterday, who's ranked number 7. Bo Nix goes for over 300 yards for the first time in his career and 2 touchdowns. That game was over quickly and early. The big test is going to be next week. Auburn comes to Ben Hill Griffith Stadium, the Swamp in Gainesville. I'm going to have both eyes on the TV for that whole game. I'm interested to see how that turns out. Number 24, Kansas State goes to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State gets it done. Washington State goes to Utah, loses to the number 19 Utes. The big story here is after the game, Mike Leach goes off on his team calling them fat, lazy, and entitled. Aren't you in charge of the team, Mike Leach? There's got to be some checks and balances going on there, man. Maybe you're spending too much time talking about mascots of different teams and if they fought, what the results would be. Get your team ready for a big road game against a ranked team. Oklahoma rolls against Texas Tech 55-16. Nothing to talk about there. Wisconsin takes care of business against Northwestern. Northwestern just can't get their offense going. I think they've got to be in the top 10, the bottom 10 in overall offensive production. But again, Pat Fitzgerald had them playing with heart, and they don't quit. They're a solid team, but they've got to find some offense. My favorite running back in the country, Jonathan Taylor, goes 26 rushes for 119 yards and a touchdown. Florida, a big test yesterday at the Swamp against the Townsend Tigers. Somehow pulls out a squeaker, 38-0. It was a nail-biter down to the end. The real test comes next week, like we mentioned, when Auburn comes to town. Florida's got to tighten up their defense. I know it was a shutout yesterday, but next week it starts getting real. And finally, number 14, Iowa, 48-3 over Middle Tennessee State. Isn't Iowa one of the most solid, best teams in college football that you never hear about? I think Kurt Ferentz is the most tenured coach right now in college football, but they're just so far off the radar, you never hear about them, and I really can't figure out why. TCU, Michigan, UCF all get convincing bounce-back wins, and that is my cue to introduce Chris Roberts, my co-host. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well. How about yourself, Ron?
Well, I'm trying to wake up. We had a barbecue yesterday, and we're watching some of the games, and, the one I've got to talk about is Nebraska at home. College game day is there, and if there was ever a time for a chant to be overrated, it had to be yesterday, because Ohio State just absolutely looked five-star lights out. I mean, that game was over at the coin flip.
Yeah. I mean, you have Justin Fields coming into that was his first test, and he passed it. Passed it with flying colors.
And it's not even just Justin Fields. It's J.K. Dobbins at running back. It's Master Teague at running back. It's their wide receiving core. It's their defense completely shutting down a dual-threat quarterback that for some reason at the beginning of the season, people were using his word and the word Heisman in the same sentence, which I still can't figure out. We have friends up in Nebraska, and I'm just wondering, how concerned are they, and what do you do if you're Scott Frost at this point?
At this point, if I'm Scott Frost, I am on the first flight back down to Florida trying to flip some recruits.
Yeah. Recruiting. I don't know. I mean, they absolutely couldn't get their own feet out of their way yesterday, and I don't know if it was Nebraska is that bad. I mean, you've got game day there. You've got a sold-out stadium for the 9,000th time, and it's a primetime game. You're on national TV, and you absolutely lay an egg in every single facet of the game. How good did Ohio State look yesterday? And is it Ohio State looking great, or is it Nebraska just not ready for prime time, or a combination of both of those?
I just think that is indicative of how good Ryan Day is as a head coach for the Ohio State football team. You have Ryan Day come and take over from Urban Meyer, as you stated earlier. And, you think there's a possible fall off, but this guy keeps it rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was like, Urban Meyer, who? Well, yeah, he did coach at Ohio State. I mean, he just made me not forget about, but to replace a coach who I would say is one of the top 5 college coaches in the past 20 years, and to look as good as they did yesterday, I've got to move them up to 2 or 3. And speaking of where we're at in the rankings, Clemson goes on the road to North Carolina yesterday. North Carolina was absolutely 100% not fazed by playing a number 1 team in the country, and they were ready. I talked about the job that Mac Brown seems to have been doing this year up until this point. We're 5 weeks in, and I don't want to say he's got it turned around, because I don't think that program was completely off the hinges last year, but he's got him in playing inspired football, and they took the number 1 team to the country down to the wire yesterday.
Yeah, I think Mac Brown is he's tapping back into his old Texas Longhorn roots, the way he has his team playing. They come in as the underdog, and the fact that they took Clemson down to the wire, I think they could have called a different play to give somehow a pass run option, probably would have been able to pull it off and pull off the upset. But it was a great team effort by North Carolina yesterday.
Yeah, I can't say anything critical about anything North Carolina did yesterday. I actually like the call to go for 2. But here's the thing, even if they convert the 2, it puts them up 22-21 with 1 minute and 23 seconds left. And then you hand the ball to Trevor Lawrence and that offense, which yesterday just couldn't seem to get it going. They couldn't seem to get their offense going, but it shows the resiliency that they are the team. They are who we thought they were. So I don't know if they're still a number 1 team. I think I've got to put Alabama 1, and then I've got to go Ohio State 2. As much as I don't like to say that, I've got to go Ohio State 2. And actually, I'm putting LSU 3 above Georgia. Even though Georgia beat Notre Dame, I'm not impressed with Notre Dame. And then I'll go Georgia 4. And then there's a significant fall off as far as I'm concerned. You start hitting the Oklahomas, the Auburns, and let's talk about Florida yesterday. They get the job more than done against a Townsend State team who was just error-prone, penalty-prone, turnover-prone. The Florida defense looked good. And it's against subpar competition, but I don't look at Florida. They're just not passing the eye test for me to be a top 10 team right now.
They may not pass the test to be a top 10 team yesterday, but what I saw from Florida yesterday is they have a bunch of playmakers, specifically at the tight end position. I mean, their tight end position could be the difference between that game next week between Florida and Auburn.
Well, you see, I'm yawning. Manny's over here sleeping. The early morning thing, man. I'm fighting through it right now. So you're talking about the playmakers that UF has, and let's just shade ahead till next week when Auburn comes to town. I tweeted out yesterday, the first round 1, if you want to follow us on Twitter, that Florida better start getting all ready for next week the minute they hit the tunnel last night. I mean, you guys start getting your equipment polished up, start watching film last night, watch it in your dreams, and break it down, because Auburn is going to give them everything they can handle and much more. And if I had to pick the game right now, I'd be shading towards Auburn, because Auburn looked that good yesterday. So you got to think, it's not just beating a Mississippi State team that's not that great. They've also beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, including the season opener when they get it done against a really good Oregon team. So if I'm in Florida, I'm concerned about next week. I mean, this is going to be a hell of a game, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game, because you have 2 defensive fronts that can actually rush the passer and actually put pressure on the quarterback position. So I'm looking to see how Florida's defensive front can put pressure on Bo Nix next week.
And yesterday, Bo Nix comes out, has his first game with over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and looked a lot better than just pedestrian, which he's looked most of the season. If he has a game like yesterday with their running game and that hurry-up, speed-up offense,
right,
plus a defensive line that is just out of this world, and an overall really solid defense, Florida's going to have all they can handle trying to keep up with Auburn next week. And I don't know what's going on with the crowds at the Swamp lately. I must be living in the twilight zone, because the stadium was about 60% full.
Well, it was Townsend, but to actually get people to come in, they had it as Family Week. And of course, Family Week doesn't necessarily mean the stadium is going to be full, because 9 times out of 10 you're playing somebody who nobody really wants to see play anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. But next week, I mean, every single butt has got to be in that stadium, because they're going to need every single positive factor they can against this Auburn team. Gus Malzahn is going to be coming in and ready to go. Virginia, Notre Dame, we watched some of that game yesterday. Notre Dame's defense is what won the game for him yesterday. It looked solid, and I'm just still trying to figure out, where is the offense for Notre Dame right now?
Well, the offense is not where it should be. If they want to remain a top 10 team. So I'm like you. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, Ian Book. I just had higher expectations from him coming in this season. Notre Dame is known the last 5 years, especially under Brian Kelly, for having a solid offense. And they scored 35 points, but a lot of that was on turnovers that they caused against Virginia in Virginia's own end of the field. It wasn't like they were having long, sustained drives and putting it in the end zone. They, forced some turnovers. And what the heck is going on with Virginia's running game? You have 29 rushing attempts and 4 yards. Bronco Mendenhall has got to pull something out. I mean, I don't even know where to go with that, because how do you have 4 rushing yards in a game where you have almost 30 attempts?
Well, that goes to show that the O-line play is not where it needs to be, and Bronco Mendenhall he's known for having a decent running game. I'm coming all the way from BYU to where he is now. So the fact that he doesn't have a running game established going towards the mid of the season, to me, it spells out trouble for Virginia down the road.
Yeah, we talked on Friday night show. So we do a Friday night live show, and then obviously right now on Sunday morning. The Friday night show, we talked about USC being brought back down to earth. We both picked Washington to win this game that was at Washington. Eason looked good again. Their defense looked good. And, Clay Helton just did not have USC ready. I don't know if it's not enough ammunition in the gun. USC has been recruiting talent. The past 5 years, they're a top 10 recruiting team. But you can't go on the road with a fourth-string quarterback, commit 3 turnovers, and expect to stay in the game against Washington.
Not against a Chris Peterson team. I think Clay Helton he's finally starting to get to the end of this curtain call. I think the curtain call is coming for Clay Helton. I think he's going by the end of the season, and USC will just start off new.
With?
Probably.
Come on, I know you want to say it.
All right, Urban.
Urban. I can't tell you how many people laughed in my face before the season. I said, Clay Helton does not have enough ammunition in the gun, and he's not a good enough coach. He's not hitting the numbers. I mean, he was basically a 32-18 or 32-17 record in his past 4 seasons, and it's just funny that Urban Meyer is now out in L.A. every single weekend working on Fox as a commentator. By the way, USC is right there in L.A. with Clay Helton, who hasn't brought them back to prominence.
Right. And the fact that you have Urban Meyer sitting there liking a tweet of someone wanting to have him as a head coach, I think that's starting to you're starting to see some waves there. You're going to see something pick up pretty soon.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be getting some traction. We can talk about Oklahoma at home against Texas Tech. Texas Tech loses their coach. They lose half their offensive line, and Jalen Hurts, Lincoln Riley have it hitting on all cylinders. This really isn't a gauge of how good Oklahoma really is, and putting up 55 points at home against Texas Tech. Here's what I'm thinking with Oklahoma, though. As solid as they are, their defense isn't where Lincoln Riley wants it to be, and it hasn't been for a while, a dominant defense. That's why I've got Oklahoma. It's just there's a vast separation between my number 4 team, Georgia, right now, and then Oklahoma. Now, that doesn't mean if they played heads up in a neutral place, it wouldn't be a competitive game. But when you look at the overall body of work and the quality of everything, coaching, special teams, offense, defense, I would have to give the nod to Georgia and Clemson and LSU, Alabama. I just think that those 4 teams are just eyeball test marketably better right now than Oklahoma, who I would have at, 6, 5? I'd have them at 5 right now, but there's definitely a gap between 5 and 6 for sure.
You have those gaps between those other programs simply because they play teams with better defenses. And so, of course, Oklahoma's going to go up and put up 60, 70 points against these teams in the Big 12 simply because they don't play defense. As they say, to borrow your term, they play Olay defense. So the fact that they don't play defense, they can't stay. You have teams that can't stop the run, you can't stop the pass. You have teams scoring just putting up prolific numbers. of course, I mean, to me, no. When you go up against those tough teams, they're going to have problems.
Yeah, speaking of Ole defense, that would describe Rutgers yesterday. I don't even know if Rutgers got off the bus in Ann Arbor, but 56-0. That a home game, a big win is exactly what Jim Harbaugh needed to kind of quiet the noise of his job security, which in my mind hasn't gone away, because when you look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, it's all kinds of hell, and I don't know if they're going to make it to a New Year's Day bowl game. And like we talked about on Friday, the search, I'm sending out a search party now and throwing up some flares and seeing what's out there as far as a coach. But they get a victory at home, and then next week it's right back to the grind, because I think next week they get Iowa.
Good luck with that one, Harbaugh.
No kidding, right?
Yeah. So looking at what they did against Rutgers, I don't think Rutgers even left the state of New Jersey, to be honest with you, looking at the way that Michigan was able to go up and down the field and actually make Shea Patterson look like he's a pretty decent quarterback yesterday. But, if I'm Michigan, I am starting to question whether Harbaugh is the right guy for our program.
Well, yeah, this is year 5. We've spent a lot of money, and we're not getting the results, and this is starting to sound like an old beaten horse that I don't want to beat anymore. I can't imagine that he's going to show me something in the last 7 weeks of the season that would convince me that he's the man that I'm confident moving forward could take us to the playoffs. I mean, let alone winning a Big Ten title, or playing for the Big Ten title, or beating Ohio State, or consistently beating Wisconsin and Michigan State. The experiment and the project just haven't panned out. I'm sending out a search committee now. TCU, Michigan, like we talked about, and UCF get big bounce-back blowout wins, which doesn't really surprise me. Next week against Iowa, I think that is going to be a hell of a game, and Michigan's got to be ready for it. I don't know if they can be ready, because I think Iowa is solid. They've got Staley's a solid quarterback. They've got Sargent at running back. They've got tight ends that they replace. Hawkinson goes in the first round last year of the NFL draft. It's just next man up. It kind of reminds me of the Patriots, because the Patriots, they don't create a lot of stir, minus the Antonio Brown thing this year. And you kind of don't hear about Iowa a lot, and yet they're always right there with 9 and 10 win seasons playing on New Year's Day. And they're just a solid team that doesn't make mistakes, plays hard, never quits. Kurt Ferentz has been around since, I was a fetus. I think that's just going to be two teams that just take out the 2x4 and start beating each other the whole game. Right now, I like Iowa to win the game. What are your thoughts on looking forward to that game next week, though?
Looking forward to that game. I think that Iowa comes in, their defense, for one thing, is going to shut down this Michigan offense that looked fairly decent against an inept Rutgers team this week. But I think Iowa's defense is going to prove to be the difference maker in that game next week.
Yeah, Shea Patterson's going to have to play out of his mind. They're going to have to get Carbonneau going at running back. They're going to have to get Peoples-Jones and Tariq Black. You've got the talent. I can't anymore. We'll see what happens next week, but I am so frustrated with a team that is so storied, has a coach that should be performing. You have talent all over the field, and you're still not able to put it together. I'm not even a fan of Michigan, and I'm frustrated with them. Hey, we want to take this time right now to just thank you guys for tuning in, watching, subscribing, hitting the like button. We appreciate your support and your viewership. We try to put on a good show here every single week. Today, I'm not obviously on my A game, because I'm going to use the excuse that I'm not totally awake, which is reality. And plus, where's Manny? Manny's over there behind you, Chris. He's not awake either, so that's my excuse. Hey, do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button if you like the show. Check out other shows that will be better than this one in our archive file on YouTube. You could also be a part of the show. thefirstrroundrd@gmail.com. Any questions that you want to ask Chris or I, we'll answer them for you live here on the air. We've got our laptop open, and if you have any comments or opinions, go on YouTube. When you hit the subscribe button, put some notes in there and tell us if you like the show or things we could do better. Walkaways from college football yesterday, just to wrap it up. Some of the things that we liked and didn't like yesterday. One of the things that I liked in college football yesterday that was one of those happy feel-good stories for me was Wake Forest is 5-0, if you can believe that. I think that Wake Forest has a solid offense. Head coach Dave Clawson has got them going in the right direction. They get a quality win yesterday over a Boston College team. And the fact that Wake Forest is 5-0, I think that's a positive for college football.
Well, my positive takeaway from last night, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about them anymore, but the fact that Florida State actually, you're starting to see the culture change in their football program. Last night, I was looking at this game in the fourth quarter. You had a North Carolina State wide receiver breaks down the field, about to score a touchdown. You have a Florida State linebacker who was rushing the passer, gets back down the field, creates a fumble, and Florida State actually covers up a fumble. That's showing me that Willie Taggart is actually, his whole precedent of trying to change the culture of the program is starting to work. Good job, Coach. Good job.
Yeah, good job. I say keep selling the lemonade and setting out a search party for a new coach at Florida State because I'm not convinced. And that's where we're going to leave that. Another thing that happened yesterday, Vandy got their first win of the season at home over Northern Illinois, which, okay, fine. But, I'm just a fan of Vandy and Derek Mason. It's a hard school to get into. It's a hard school to win at. You're in a tough conference. And I say 2 thumbs up to the job Derek Mason does. I mean, what are your expectations there? They're only 1-3 right now, which it's a fan base that it can be easily frustrating because the victories and the high points and the celebration points are few and far between. But they get a victory at home yesterday against Northern Illinois. So I say 2 thumbs up, Derek Mason and Vandy. That's one of my feel-good stories for the weekend.
Well, one of my laughs for the weekend goes to Wisconsin. What was up with those outfits yesterday, man?
You didn't like those?
No, I didn't.
What's wrong with you?
I didn't care for that. No.
Really?
No.
I mean, I don't want to turn the first round into Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, but I like those throwback uniforms. They look like they were for the 50s.
Exactly. They need to stay in the 50s.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Those things look classic, man.
Yeah,
I thought they looked good.
No. I didn't care for the uniforms, but their defense played well. I love the fact that they had a defensive touchdown yesterday with that strip fumble. Good job with the defense. Not so good with the outfits, fellas.
Really?
Yeah,
Northwestern was wearing the throwback uniforms, and I like when they had. Now, some of the throwback uniforms that we've seen lately, I could do without, like the Pittsburgh beehive striped pirate looking. I don't even know what that is. That look can just go. But for most part, the ones this is the ones that I want to see, and I'm biased, is the throwback uniforms, the dark blue with the dark yellow Thunderbolt stripes from the San Diego Chargers from about 1981, 1982, 83, the Air Coryell years, Dan Fouts, right. John Johnson, Charlie Joyner, Wes Chandler, Chuck Muncie. Those are some good throwback uniforms. Right. But, hey, that's personal choice, and I liked the Wisconsin uniform yesterday. When I saw them, I was like, hey, those look good. What I also liked is, has anyone noticed that Minnesota is 4-0? And before you say they haven't played anybody, just ask yourself how many teams right now in college football after week 5 would like to be 4-0. PJ Fleck, man, he's rowing that boat. They're 4-0.
Yeah, he's rowing that boat in Minnesota until he gets to that frozen tundra later on during the season. My take for this week was everybody sleeping on the Fighting Herminators of Arizona State. They pulled off a big win the other night against Cal. You had a freshman quarterback that comes into a hostile territory, I guess you could say a hostile territory at Cal, and he walks out with the victory. Good job, Coach.
Yeah, we actually watched that game, and Cal, they were ready to play. They were fired up. That was a solid victory for Arizona State. Arizona State, I would put them at least on the same level right now, if not a notch above USC.
Yeah.
If you're an Arizona State fan, you've got to be happy with what Herm Edwards has done. He's only in his second season. And what's the expectation at Arizona State? It can't be at this point to win the Pac-12, right?
It can't be to win the Pac-12, but at this juncture in time right now, they are kind of tied in the first place in the South of the Pac-12. So
They're heading in the right direction.
They're heading in the right
They're
direction.
heading in the right direction. Things that concerned me yesterday, and I've talked about this in the past couple weeks. If you're waking up this morning and you're a fan of Texas A&M, what are you thinking? You have a neutral site game against Arkansas, who quite frankly isn't that good this year. Hell, I don't even know who the coach is at Arkansas. I'm not even supposed to say that out loud, I don't think, but I couldn't tell you one of their skill position players. I don't know who the head coach is, and Texas A&M squeaks out of a neutral site game, barely winning it. And the first place I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to Kellen Mond at quarterback. I'm concerned with Kellen Mond. I've talked about this before. His decision-making, strength of his arm. I don't look at Kellen Mond and think this is the guy that can lead me to the top of the food chain in the SEC West. And here's the other concern if you're a Texas A&M fan. Jimbo Fisher and his $75 million contract or whatever it is, I don't see the turnaround happening. This is his second year, right?
His second year.
Yeah, and I don't see the turnaround happening yet. And that's a lot of money to not see a turnaround happening yet. And if I'm a Texas A&M booster or a fan, here's my real concern, is you're playing mediocre football right now, and you've still got Bama, Georgia, LSU, and South Carolina on your schedule.
Well,
where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Like, I was sitting there watching that game yesterday thinking to myself, okay, playing for a national title in the next 2 or 3 years?
No, I don't see
I can't.
I don't see Texas A&M playing for a title. As long as Nick Saban is in the SEC West, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
You know, I thought that being a big game, proven, big name head coach, Jimbo Fisher, that I could see a path when he got hired where he could turn Texas A&M around. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, why are you sticking with Kellen Mond? An unproven commodity in one of the toughest divisions of any conference in college football. And why aren't you playing at a higher level? Like I said, you know, I'm talking about the concerns of the weekend, and Texas A&M yesterday did not pass the eye test. And if I'm a fan, I'm really concerned. Another thing that I saw yesterday, Pitt at home, 17-14 over Delaware. What is Pitt? They have play with heart, awesome crowd participation last week at home, and a huge win against UCF that they weren't even supposed to be in the game. And they played tough against Penn State on the road. Again, that was a loss. But then you're at home against Delaware and you squeak out a 17-14 win. And I'm thinking, you know, what is Pat Narduzzi doing in Pitt? It's a win, but it's unimpressive. I don't know what Pitt is. They're just a middle-of-the-road team that had a pretty solid game last week against UCF. Or UCF just laid an egg. I don't know what Pitt is.
I think Pitt is a middle-of-the-road to heading back into mediocrity, a mediocre team. You look at Pitt; they had a big up game against Penn State, played pretty well in that game. They had a big up game against UCF, played pretty well, squeaked out the win. And then, as you said yesterday, they played down to the competition. So when you have teams that can get up emotionally for the big games but play down to the competition, you start to lean back into mediocrity to me.
Yeah, maybe Clemson is playing to the level of their competition this year, and you know, that's something that we can watch moving forward. You know, I've got more concerns this week than high points, and one of my concerns is the loss of Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech. I think is more of a factor than a lot of people thought it would be. And I know that this isn't one of the trending topics in college football at all. But, you know, Georgia Tech, yesterday, they play Temple. They go down 24-2. So far this year, they've scored 50 points in 4 games, Georgia Tech's offense. I know you're trying to completely change the way that you attack teams on defense with their offense, and it's not a run-based offense anymore at Georgia Tech, but they've had 3 different quarterbacks this year, and we're in week 5. And this team is used to having 7, 8, or 9 wins, getting to a bowl game. And I know Paul Johnson's gone, and I know there's a new regime there, and everything's getting changed. But how upset / concerned are you if you're a Georgia Tech fan? Because this is kind of sad to see. They've really fallen right off the table. This hasn't been a gradual decline.
Yeah, if I'm a Georgia Tech fan, I'm just going to point on the season. These guys just seem to not get it right, and maybe it's that they don't have the players to fit the scheme that the coach wants right now. But if I'm Georgia Tech and I'm a fan right now, I'm putting on the season and I'm going to do some engineering work somewhere.
Yeah. The only thing that's more concerning to me than where Georgia Tech is at is where South Florida is at with head coach Charlie Strong. We saw them against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin pretty much did whatever they wanted to do, and Wisconsin's a solid top 10 team. That was at South Florida, and that was a game that it wasn't even Wisconsin imposing their will defensively on South Florida's offense. It was South Florida continuously making mistakes, bad quarterbacking decisions, and when this is what got me, and this is, week 1, when the camera panned to the sideline, to the offensive coordinator and to Charlie Strong of South Florida, they looked lost. They looked like they didn't have an idea of what the game plan was. They've been outscored 166-47 so far this season. And yesterday they lose to SMU, who has a good quarterback, Texas transfer Shane Buechele, 48-21. They're in the top, the bottom 10 teams in college football at this point. And Charlie Strong is just a coordinator. He shouldn't be in the head coaching position. We learned that at Texas. We're learning that now at South Florida. And I just think it's really sad because a couple years ago, we were talking about UCF, South Florida, Miami, Florida State, and Florida all being solid teams in Florida and in the top 25. And now South Florida has just fallen off, and I just think it's sad to see. I mean, I don't know. I just saw some of the statistics yesterday and wanted to comment on it because I just felt bad for college football and for South Florida fans.
South Florida right now they're having a problem with the recruiting. I mean, right now you have UCF that's just going crazy. I mean, offensively, defense, they have a pretty good defense. So those recruits that they used to be able to split, they no longer can get anymore. And with you, I'm with you when it comes down to Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong, he is a defensive coordinator. I think if he was going to stay in a head coaching position, he should have stayed at Louisville. He had Louisville going in the right direction, and he jumped up, took a bigger job, and he wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, he absolutely wasn't ready for it. And so I don't know that Louisville was going in the right direction because he was only there and had a cup of coffee, and now he's at a much smaller program in one of the most fertile recruiting states, Texas, Florida, and California being my top 3, and you're not getting it done. And it's not even that I don't like Charlie Strong, because I do. I think he's a quality, solid character guy, but, it might be time for the realization button to be hit and smashed and just say, hey, you know what? I'm a DC. I'm a really good defensive coordinator, and he's proved that at South Carolina and Florida and other places. And, maybe it's just a case of somebody needs to gently remind him, like, hey, know what your role is, man, because head coaching, it just hasn't panned out for Charlie Strong in a great way, and it's sad to see where South Florida is right now. Shifting gears, let's go to the NFL. There's actually some good NFL games here. The first one that I want to talk about is New England 3-0 going to Buffalo, who's also 3-0, and that's the only reason I'm even willing to discuss this game. New England's given up 7 points on the road. Julian Edelman is a question mark with some rib injuries from last week. I think this is actually going to be a good game, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. I think it's actually going to be a good test for New England because even though they're 3-0, the combined record of the teams they've beat so far this year is 0-9. So it's not like they've gone up against, lights out competition. And it might be a fairly closer game than it's been in the past 4 or 5 years for New England.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game too. think the Bills Mafia is going to be out in full effect. But I think today New England is going to have to lean on their running game. With Julian Edelman being questionable, I mean, I look for Sonny Michel to have a pretty big game against this Bills defense today.
Ugh. Should have kept talking there. I was off yawning off camera for the 5th time. I think it's going to be a close game. And it might come down to just the coaching factor. That Bill Belichick is just that much better of a coach and has them ready. But, the Bills' defense has played solid. Josh Allen needs to start getting consistent play. He needs to start being a consistent quarterback, making better decisions. Let's cut down on the interceptions, run a little bit less. But again, who's he working with on offense? They got rid of LaShawn McCoy, for crying out loud. So I don't know how much of an offensive threat and challenge they're going to be. I think one of the things that's kept them in the games so far this year has been his legs, but that's going to be a detriment to his health. No running quarterback ever makes it to the Super Bowl and wins unless it's Russell Wilson. And he's just got to become more of a pocket quarterback for me to have more confidence in where Buffalo's at right now. KC goes on the road, giving up 7 points to Detroit. Has Matt Patricia got Detroit turned around?
That's a good question. We'll see. It remains to be seen. I'm gonna put it that way. There's definitely willing to see how KC is gonna do going on the road against Detroit. Detroit is I'm not going to say a formidable opponent, but they're a pretty decent opponent this season, so we'll see. I
think that Matt Patricia is going to have them ready to play, and it comes down to the same thing when we're talking about KC is their defense. That's why I think this game is going to be close, because they brought in free agents to help shore up the defense, and they're still giving up a lot of points. I think that Detroit keeps it close in this game. Yesterday, I hit on my 5-star Millennium pick teaser of the century, which puts me at 5-0. And if I was going to have a teaser special today, it would be take Detroit plus the 13 at home against KC. I think they're going to have just enough offense to keep this game close, but I think KC still pulls it out. A game that I'm kind of interested in and really shouldn't be because it's not two good teams is Washington going on the road to the New York Giants. Daniel Jones in his second game last week. He came out like a ball of fire. Comeback victory on the road to a very bad Tampa Bay team with interception magnet Jameis Winston. And this week, it's the whole story isn't even about Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley won't be playing, but the real story is how long are we going to keep going with Jay Gruden at head coach in Washington? And is it time to put in Dwayne Haskins and see what he can do?
It is time to put in Dwayne Haskins. Jay Gruden, on the other hand, I don't know if he makes it to the end of the season. He's had quarterbacks. He had running backs. He has Adrian Peterson, who's 1,001 years old.
Still effective though.
Still effective.
Well, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Still effective, but still at the same time, they just haven't been able to put it together. And so that's a question on Jay Gruden. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Case Keenum has been a good quarterback. He's been more than serviceable this year. I think some of it's got to come down to the play calling of Jay Gruden. Last week, they were in the red zone, and four times inside the 8-yard line, he didn't hand off to Adrian Peterson one time. And I know Adrian Peterson's old, but I know that Adrian Peterson is also still an effective quarterback. He's running back. He's a better than average running back, even at his age. How do you not at least hand off to him once?
Again, you have to ask Jay Gruden that. Jay Gruden has always had questionable offensive play calls. It goes all the way back to when Robert Griffin was their quarterback. Yeah. It goes back that far. So, Jay Gruden has always had that question mark over him of what are you thinking?
It's too bad that we always look at the coach and have coaching questions and say, how long before we pull the string on the coach? But when it comes to Washington, their glory days are so far in the rearview mirror. How come people aren't asking, well, when are we going to pull the plug on Daniel Snyder? He's the owner, right? He's the one bringing in he's hiring the superstructure, and I just think there should be more onus on the ownership. Why aren't Dallas Cowboy fans? When I talk to Dallas Cowboy fans, they defend the hell out of Jerry Jones. why do we put some of this pressure on the owners who are actually making some of these decisions? Jay Gruden should have been gone a long time ago. That's my opinion. He's another one who's a really good coordinator, not a great head coach. But, what do I know? Saquon Barkley is going to be out of the game. I think Washington keeps it close on the road. They're only getting 3.5 points. I'll take the 3.5, actually. I'll take the 3.5 points in Washington to keep it close. A game that I'm actually really looking forward to, Carolina at Houston. Carolina's getting 5. Chris, I'll just let you take it from there.
Sure.
What are we going to see from Cam?
Nothing.
Are we
Because
going to
he's
see
not
consistent offense from Houston? Is Cam going to even play?
No, Cam is not going to play. Cam is actually out with a foot injury that he hid from the team. Then he says he's going to take time to actually get healed right. So I'm Carolina. I'm just hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey and let him do what he do.
Yeah, I see a lot of bubble screens in their future. I see a lot of draw plays. And I would be concerned about overusing Christian McCaffrey when he's, obviously their breakaway talent. Their backup quarterback last week actually had a pretty good game. Was it his name's Kelly? I mean, I don't even know who this guy is. He just kind of came out of nowhere and had a pretty good game. But Houston's offense has got to show up. I still don't know what Houston is this year, and it's the beginning of the season, but I want to have a solid picture of, if I'm a Houston fan, of what we're doing on offense, and so far I don't know what we're doing on offense. It's like good game, bad game.
Yeah, you would think with Deshaun Watson being there now, being implemented into this system, that, he would be more of a consistent quarterback. But what Houston is missing, the element of having a consistent running game. Without that running game to help Deshaun Watson, they're gonna continue to struggle offensively.
Yeah, they got a quality win last week on the road at the Los Angeles Chargers. But, I've got to think, I got to take Carolina plus the 5 on the road today. There's just something inside me that says that Carolina is going to be keeping this game close. They can compete to actually win the game, but I'm taking Carolina plus the 5. Minnesota goes on the road to Chicago. Chicago's given up 1.5 points. I don't know and have very little confidence in Mitchell Trubisky. I know you have a lights-out defense. Dalvin Cook on the side for Minnesota has been back to the form that he was at the last year at Florida State. And Kirk Cousins has to start passing the ball. We can't have games where he's only going for less than 100 yards. I think this is going to be a tight, close game. And being on the road, I might take Minnesota plus the 1.5 right now.
Yeah, I think this game right here has strong implications for who's going to win that division. Right now, Green Bay is even though they're leading right now, they're still kind of suspect in that division. I think Minnesota has the talent to actually overtake that division. You have a strong running game with Dalvin Cook. You have Kirk Cousins. He has offensive weapons, so I'm still trying to figure out why not spread the ball out a little bit more off of play action with Dalvin Cook having these good games. So if I'm my Minnesota fans, I'm looking kind of concerned at the head coach. Like, can you please get him to do some play actions, please?
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 teams in the NFL that, just like in college football, stand out heads above the rest. They just passed the eye test in a great way. I'm talking about New England. I'm talking about the Rams. And one of those teams I got to put in that category is the Dallas Cowboys. They've got talent all over the field. They've got a solid defense. I think they have a solid offense, but whether they can keep everybody there, that's a question for down the road. And Jason Garrett at head coach is what I would call serviceable. He's not going to ruin the game for you. He's not going to be Bill Belichick or Vince Lombardi. They go on the road this week and play a New Orleans team that doesn't have Drew Brees, is starting Teddy Bridgewater again, who had a good road game last week against Seattle.
Right.
And Dallas is laying 3. I don't know where to go on this game. There's a part of me that says lay the 3 because I'm not convinced in Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, Teddy Bridgewater is basically just a serviceable backup right now. He doesn't have the strong arm. His arm talent isn't as good as it was when he was playing at Louisville. So if I'm you, I'm leaning the 3 as well.
You're taking Dallas Lane in the 3.
Yep.
And how come Mark Ingram has never shown why he won the Heisman since he's gotten to? Not Mark Ingram. I think they've got to use Alvin Kamara more. He's their weapon. He's their breakaway guy. And you also have Michael. Who's the wide receiver there? That just signed the big contract.
Oh, Michael.
Okay, Taylor,
yeah,
we got to make
guy.
a production note right now and stop the show because you definitely have to bring coffee in the mornings. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's giving me the thumbs up. I need my coffee, adrenaline, cocaine, anything because I'm just like firing on a half a cylinder this morning. Wide receiver, New Orleans. They've got to use their wide receivers more. Teddy Bridgewater has to use Alvin Kamara as a safety gap, and their defense has to show up and slow down Dak Prescott, who's not exactly known for throwing 300-plus yards games until this year. That's it for the NFL. Chris, what else is going on in the world of sports, my friend?
Well, we have Kansas coach Bill Self throwing shade at the NCAA. This guy is going through a probation situation where he has level 1 violations leveled against him. This guy is in a video with Snoop Dogg's gin and juice with a gold chain with a dollar sign on it, walking into a record store to actually promote their Friday Night Lights promotion for their basketball program.
Real video or meme video?
This is just a video to promote, their Friday Night Lights basketball promotion that they do every year for the
midnight kickoff.
Midnight kickoff, yeah.
And this is a real video.
This is a real video. And then what makes it so bad? He has a big logo of Adidas on the shirt. So I'm sitting here like, are you really wanting to poke this beer guy? And I mean, he looks like he's poking it, and he's having fun doing it.
We talked on Friday about NCAA violations when it comes to college basketball. It's like it's kind of like a firework. It's this big thing that comes out, and everybody hears about it, and then within a couple seconds, it's gone. And 2 months later, you're like, wait, who had the violation? What was going on? And it just seems to go away because I think there's so much shoe money driving these AAU teams, driving these coaches, driving where the recruits go. There's so much pressure. And I think it's shoe money that makes a lot of this stuff go away. What else is piquing your interest this week in the world of sports?
Well, the NBA has now come up with a snitch line for tampering. For some reason, the NBA...
like a 1-800 line.
Like a 1-800 line for tampering.
Who's going to be using that?
That's the good question.
What?
Yeah, my point exactly. So they come up with this line, this 1-800 line for tampering, due to the issue we had last season with the creation of the Los Angeles Clippers team, where Kawhi Leonard was talking to the Clippers team, and he really wanted to play with Paul George. So the Clippers did what they had to do to make that happen.
The NBA legitimately came up with a 1-800 snitch line to prevent tampering between teams. Okay, so we're going to pause right here on this one. So Adam Silver, I think, has done one of the best jobs out of all the 4 major sports in America.
Right.
A 1-800. Hey, how do you sign off? Who's calling this line? The agents aren't going to be calling. Players won't call on each other.
Of course not.
I mean, is there a fan that calls up and says, "Hey, I'm on 8th Street in Los Angeles downtown. I see LeBron James talking to some agent." I can't even get my head. Am I crazy? Is this the Twilight Zone?
No.
Did I ate a bunch of drugs this morning? I mean, don't answer that, anybody. If you're what the hell is this? This is probably one of the stupidest ideas. A tampering line that the NBA set up themselves. Who's calling this? How does this work?
I don't know, but the funniest thing with this is the NBA fined a team for tampering with themselves this week.
Who is this?
The NBA fined the Milwaukee Bucks GM John Horton.
Is this the Giannis? We're going to sign him.
We're going to sign him. I'm like, what? How is that tampering when he's talking about his own player? I'm
well,
lost.
maybe we've reached an all-time low. I don't know.
I'm lost.
Was there anything else piquing your interest, Chris, this week in the world of sports?
Just to follow up from Friday night, the fight with Earl Porter, with Earl Spence and Sean Porter. Great fight. The fight went down to a split decision. Earl Spence won and unified the titles, unified the IBC and the WBC titles, which sets up a match between either Earl Spence and Manny Pacquiao, which will be a good fight down the line, just to unify those titles as well.
I'm not sure that I want to see Manny Pacquiao fighting anymore, not because he hasn't been a great champion, but it's like I've already seen how it's like in sync. I think I know how this story ends, and he's on the other side of 35 now, I believe. I think his best years are in the rearview mirror. Great champion, heart of a champion, gave us some great fights, but I'm not sure that my interest level is as high as it would have been 10 years ago for some of these fights that should have been put together, Mayweather, Pacquiao, and then we have to wait 6 years. But, that's boxing, and that's why no one talks about it except us here on the first round. And we want to thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We're here Fridays at night, Sunday mornings doing live shows, and that music can only mean one thing. It's time to thank our support staff. But first, I want to thank you for participating with us, watching in. Tell your friends about the first round. We're just getting off the ground here and about 2 months into it. We love the people that we've interacted with as we've gone out and started meeting some of the listeners for the show. But again, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, help us build up the first round and support St. Jude. And now to the support staff. I want to thank my man, Chris Roberts, my co-host, the man on the board, Taylor, the son of God, El Presidente, Chet 40, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next Friday right here on YouTube Live. Until then, take care, everybody.